Hello, young scholars. Welcome to the Unit 4 Midpoint Quiz review video for your Spring World History course. In this video, we'll dive into the key concepts and ideas that you need to master to ace your final quiz. We'll focus on essential topics such as imperialism and its effects, the causes of World War I, including militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism, the impact of new technological advances, causes for U.S. entry into World War I, and the effects of World War I on events and conflicts that would follow it. So, get ready to build on your knowledge and understanding of World War I so that you can show how much you've learned on your Unit 4 Midpoint Quiz. Here we go, young historians. Imperialism happens when a country shows its power and control over another country. This could be done in different ways, like using military force to take over or through diplomacy, making deals or agreements to gain influence. Missionaries played an important role in spreading Christianity. They were sent to colonies to share their religion, which often changed the culture and traditions of the local people. Social Darwinism was the belief that one group was superior to another. Imperialists thought they were better than indigenous people, and this idea was used to justify their control over other nations. Trading markets were established in colonies. Imperial powers created their own markets to control the buying and selling of goods, which helped them grow richer and more powerful. Colonies were also used to control raw materials. These materials, like cotton, rubber, and minerals, were claimed by imperial powers and used to fuel their industries back home. Imperialism led to increased global competition. As European countries and America expanded their empires, they competed with each other to gain more colonies, resources, and influence around the world. This competition created tension and pushed nations to build themselves up in several ways. First, militarism. To protect their colonies and assert their power, countries began to strengthen their military forces. They built larger armies and navies, developed new weapons, and prepared for potential conflicts. This focus on militarism made the world more dangerous and unstable. Second, alliances. As competition grew, countries started forming alliances to protect themselves. These were agreements between nations to support each other in case of war. While alliances were meant to provide security, they also created a system where a conflict between two countries could quickly involve many others. Third, imperialism itself. The desire to expand and control more territories didn't stop. Countries continued to take over new colonies, which only increased the competition and tension between them. This cycle of imperialism made global conflicts more likely. Finally, nationalism. Nationalism is the belief that one's country is superior to others. This feeling grew stronger as countries competed for power and influence. Nationalism encouraged people to support imperialism and militarism, but it also caused rivalries between nations as each believed they were the best and deserved more. Let's look a little deeper at these overall causes of conflict during World War I by using the acronym MAIN. Whenever you encounter questions about the causes of World War I, focus on these elements. Militarism. Militarism is the belief that a country should have and maintain a strong military. Before World War I, many countries in Europe were building up their armies and navies. They believed having a powerful military would protect them and show their strength. This arms race created tension and made war more likely because nations were ready and willing to use their military forces. Alliances. Alliances are unions or agreements between countries to support each other, often for mutual benefit. Before the war, European countries formed alliances to protect themselves. For example, the Triple Alliance included Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, while the Triple Entente included France, Russia, and Britain. These alliances meant that if one country went to war, its allies would also join, turning a small conflict into a much larger one. Imperialism. Imperialism is when a country shows its power and control over another, often through military force or diplomacy. Before World War I, European nations competed to build empires by taking over colonies in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. This competition created rivalries and increased tensions between the major powers, as they all wanted to dominate more land and resources. Lastly, nationalism is intense pride in one's nation and supporting its interests, even if it harms other nations. Before World War I, nationalism was very strong in Europe. Many people felt a deep connection to their country, often based on shared language and culture. This pride made them willing to fight for their nation's success and dominance. However, nationalism also created tension, as countries competed to prove their superiority. In some cases, smaller ethnic groups within larger empires like Austria-Hungary wanted independence, which further increased conflicts leading up to the war. The causes of World War I can be remembered using the acronym MAIN, which stands for militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Let's take a few moments on this slide to review each of these important concepts. Militarism. Militarism is the belief that a country should have and maintain a strong military. Before World War I, many countries in Europe were building up their armies and navies. They believed having a powerful military would protect them and show their strength. This arms race created tension and made war more likely because nations were ready and willing to use their military forces. Alliances. Alliances are unions or agreements between countries to support each other, often for mutual benefit. Before the war, European countries formed alliances to protect themselves. For example, the Triple Alliance included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, while the Triple Entente included France, Russia, and Britain. These alliances meant that if one country went to war, its allies would also join, turning a small conflict into a much larger one. Imperialism. Imperialism is when a country shows its power and control over another, often through military force or diplomacy. Before World War I, European nations competed to build empires by taking over colonies in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. This competition created rivalries and increased tensions between the major powers, as they all wanted to dominate more land and resources. Lastly, nationalism is intense pride in one's nation and supporting its interests, even if it harms other nations. Before World War I, nationalism was very strong in Europe. Many people felt a deep connection to their country, often based on shared language and culture. This pride made them willing to fight for their nation's success and dominance. However, nationalism also created tension, as countries competed to prove their superiority. In some cases, smaller ethnic groups within larger empires like Austria-Hungary wanted independence, which further increased conflicts leading up to the war. Militarism is the belief that a country should have a strong military and be ready to use it if necessary. Before World War I, European countries like Germany, Italy, and Great Britain began building up their armies and navies. They created more advanced weapons, like tanks and submarines, and trained their soldiers to be prepared for war. This arms race wasn't just about defense, it was also a way for countries to show their power and intimidate others. As each nation strengthened its military, others felt the need to do the same to keep up. This competition created tension between countries and made war more likely. With so many weapons and trained soldiers ready to fight, it only took a small spark to set off a massive conflict. Secret alliances played an important role in the start of World War I. One of these alliances was called the Triple Alliance, which was formed by Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy in 1881. The agreement was simple. If one of these countries was attacked, the others promised to help defend them. This alliance was kept secret from other nations, and it was renewed several times leading up to World War I. The Triple Alliance created a sense of security for its members, but it also increased tensions with other countries. For example, nations outside the alliance, like France and Russia, felt threatened and started forming their own alliances. These secret agreements made it easier for a small conflict to grow into a much larger war, because once one country was attacked, its allies were pulled into the fight. This is exactly what happened when World War I began. Imperialism played a major role in starting World War I. European countries like France and Great Britain were expanding their empires by taking control of colonies in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. This expansion gave them access to valuable resources and increased their global power. However, it also created tension among European countries as they competed to gain more land and influence. Other nations, like Germany and Austria-Hungary, wanted to expand their own empires but felt left behind. This competition for colonies and resources led to rivalries and mistrust between the major powers. The desire to dominate more territories and prove their strength made countries more aggressive, which contributed to the growing tensions that eventually led to World War I. Nationalism played a key role in sparking World War I, especially through the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austrian throne, and his presence symbolized the power and control of Austria-Hungary over regions like Bosnia, which had a large Serbian population. Many Serbians, fueled by nationalism, wanted independence from Austria-Hungary and saw Franz Ferdinand as a threat to their freedom. When the Archduke visited Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand decided to take action. They viewed his visit as an insult and an opportunity to strike back against Austria-Hungary's control. Members of the Black Hand assassinated Franz Ferdinand and Sophie during the visit, which angered Austria-Hungary and led them to blame Serbia for the attack. This event, driven by nationalist tensions, set off a chain reaction of alliances and conflicts that ultimately sparked World War I. Before World War I, two major alliances were formed in Europe: the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. These alliances were agreements between countries to support each other, especially in case of war. They were created because European nations were competing for power, land, and resources, and they felt they needed allies to protect themselves. The Triple Alliance was formed first in 1882. It included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These countries agreed to help each other if one of them was attacked. This alliance gave them a sense of security but also made them more confident in their actions, knowing they had support. However, Italy later left the alliance when World War I began, choosing to stay neutral at first and then joining the other side. The Triple Entente was formed later in 1907 as a response to the Triple Alliance. It included France, Russia, and Great Britain. These countries joined together because they felt threatened by the growing power of Germany and its allies. The Triple Entente wasn't a formal military alliance like the Triple Alliance, but it created a strong bond between the three nations. These alliances played a big role in starting World War I. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, other countries were pulled into the conflict because of their alliances. Russia supported Serbia, which brought in France and Great Britain from the Triple Entente. Germany supported Austria-Hungary, and the alliances turned what could have been a small war into a global conflict. Technological advancements before and during World War I had a significant impact on both sparking the conflict and prolonging it. These advancements in warfare technology made battles deadlier and caused a massive increase in casualties. They also changed how wars were fought, making World War I one of the most destructive conflicts in history. One major advancement was the machine gun, which could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, making it nearly impossible for soldiers to cross open fields without heavy losses. This led to the development of trench warfare, where both sides dug in to avoid being mowed down, creating a long and grueling stalemate. Tanks, introduced later in the war, were armored vehicles that could cross trenches and difficult terrain, helping to break through enemy lines. But they were still in their early stages and not always reliable. Submarines also played a big role, especially for Germany, which used them in unrestricted warfare to attack merchant and supply ships. This disrupted supply lines and created fear on the seas. German submarines, or U-boats, even attacked ships with civilians such as the Lusitania, which angered countries like the United States and eventually led to their involvement in the war. Other deadly advancements included poison gas, such as chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas, which caused immense suffering and death. Soldiers had to develop and use gas masks to protect themselves, but these weapons caused fear and panic on the battlefield. Flamethrowers, used by the Germans, were another terrifying weapon, using compressed gas to shoot fire at enemy troops in trenches. The war also saw the rise of airplanes, which were first used for reconnaissance to gather information about enemy positions. By 1915, machine guns were installed on planes, turning them into weapons to take down enemy aircraft. This added a new dimension to warfare in the skies. Communication also advanced with the use of wireless telegraphs and telephones, which allowed commanders to coordinate attacks and share information more quickly. These technological advancements not only made the war deadlier, but also prolonged it. Instead of quick battles, the war became a drawn-out conflict, as both sides developed new ways to counter each other's weapons. The devastation caused by these technologies left a lasting impact on the world and changed how wars were fought forever. Trench warfare was a type of fighting during World War I, where opposing sides dug long trenches in the ground to attack, defend, and counterattack each other. These trenches were built in parallel lines, usually 2 or 3 rows, connected by smaller trenches called communication trenches. Soldiers would live, fight, and take cover in these trenches, which stretched for miles across the battlefield. While trenches provided protection from enemy fire, they also created terrible living conditions for soldiers. One of the most common problems was trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to cold, wet, and muddy environments. The trenches were often damp because of rain, poor drainage, and the freezing temperatures. Soldiers' feet would remain wet for long periods, causing swelling, numbness, and infection. In severe cases, trench foot could lead to gangrene, requiring amputation. This condition was so common because soldiers spent weeks or even months in the trenches without proper footwear or opportunities to dry their feet. Trench warfare also had other effects on the soldiers and the war itself. It led to a stalemate, as neither side could easily advance without being exposed to enemy fire. This resulted in long, drawn-out battles with high casualties and little progress. Life in the trenches was harsh, with soldiers facing constant danger from enemy attacks, diseases, and the psychological toll of living in such grim conditions. Trench warfare became one of the defining features of World War I, symbolizing the hardships and devastation of the conflict. The sinking of the RMS Lusitania and the revelation of the Zimmermann Note were 2 pivotal events that significantly influenced the United States' decision to enter World War I. Both incidents shifted public opinion and persuaded American leaders that neutrality was no longer an option. The sinking of the RMS Lusitania, 1915. The RMS Lusitania was a British passenger liner that was sunk by a German U-boat, submarine, on May 7, 1915, off the coast of Ireland. The attack killed 1,198 people, including 128 Americans. Germany had been using unrestricted submarine warfare to target Allied ships, claiming that vessels like the Lusitania were carrying war supplies, which in this case was partially true. However, the attack on a civilian ship, especially one carrying American passengers, caused outrage in the United States. Impact on U.S. involvement. The sinking of the Lusitania did not immediately lead to U.S. entry into the war, but it marked a turning point in public opinion. Many Americans who had previously supported neutrality began to view Germany as a dangerous aggressor. President Woodrow Wilson demanded that Germany stop its unrestricted submarine warfare, and for a time Germany complied. However, the Lusitania incident planted the seeds of distrust and resentment toward Germany, making it harder for Americans to remain neutral as the war continued. The Zimmermann Note, 1917. The Zimmermann Note, or Zimmermann Telegram, was a secret diplomatic communication sent by German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann to the German ambassador in Mexico in January 1917. The telegram proposed a military alliance between Germany and Mexico if the U.S. entered the war against Germany. In return, Germany promised to support Mexico in reclaiming territories lost to the U.S., including Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. British intelligence intercepted the telegram and shared it with the United States, which made it public in March 1917. Impact on U.S. involvement. The Zimmermann Note caused outrage in the United States. The idea of Germany encouraging Mexico to attack the U.S. was seen as a direct threat to American sovereignty and security. It confirmed fears that Germany was not only a threat to Europe but also to the Western Hemisphere. Combined with Germany's resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare in early 1917, the Zimmermann Note convinced many Americans that neutrality was no longer viable. Combined influence on U.S. involvement. The sinking of the Lusitania and the Zimmermann Note worked together to push the U.S. toward war. The Lusitania incident highlighted the dangers of Germany's aggressive tactics and its disregard for civilian lives, while the Zimmermann Note revealed Germany's willingness to conspire against the United States directly. These events, along with other factors like economic ties to the Allies and the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, led President Wilson to ask Congress for a declaration of war in April 1917. Both events played critical roles in shifting American public opinion and convincing leaders that U.S. involvement in World War I was necessary to protect national interests and promote global stability. Let's take a closer look at the effects of World War I, broken down into 4 categories: economic, social, geographical, and political. Each of these shows how the war changed the world in big ways. First, the economic effects. During the war, governments needed money, so they sold something called war bonds. These were like loans from citizens to the government, which they promised to pay back later. Military spending also increased a lot, creating jobs in factories and reducing unemployment. In some places, like Russia, systems like socialism or communism were introduced, where the government controlled industries and wealth was shared more equally. Now, let's talk about the social effects. With so many men fighting in the war, women stepped into jobs that were usually done by men. This was a big step toward gender equality. The war also caused a lot of loss. Millions of people died or were injured. Many people lost their homes because of the destruction, and some became refugees, fleeing to safer places. Next, the geographical effects. After the war, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was broken apart, and new countries like Austria, Hungary, and Yugoslavia were created. The Ottoman Empire was also divided, with its lands taken over by European powers. Germany lost the territory of Alsace-Lorraine to France as part of the peace agreement. Finally, the political effects. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson introduced his 14 points, a plan for peace that included allowing nations to govern themselves, called self-determination. The League of Nations was created to prevent future wars. However, the Treaty of Versailles punished Germany harshly. Germany had to accept blame for the war, pay reparations, and reduce its military. These punishments created anger in Germany, eventually helping Adolf Hitler rise to power. Overall, World War I had massive effects on the economy, society, geography, and politics, shaping the world we know today. Thanks for watching this video review for the Spring World History Unit 4 Midpoint Quiz. Remember to use this video and any other resources shared in the online course, or by your teacher as you complete the video quiz on this unit. Let's end this review by considering the words of Ernest Hemingway, who said, "Never think that war, no matter how necessary, nor how justified, is not a crime." And President Woodrow Wilson, who famously called World War I the war to end all wars. What have the lessons of history taught you about the need, value, and impact of war and conflict? Think about this as we examine and analyze the causes, events, and impacts of global conflicts in the 20th and 21st centuries.